Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to our channel, True Courtroom Stories. This is episode 72, and it's a really special one based on some fantastic research by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer. Today, we're going to dive into a story that connects a piece of ancient legal history to the world we live in right now in a way you might not expect.
So let's just jump right in with a question that I know sounds a little wild. What on earth could a judge from 8th century Baghdad possibly teach us about modern taxes? It feels like two completely different worlds, right? Well, stick with me, because we're about to see how a legal principle from over 1,000 years ago isn't just relevant, it's actually essential for understanding the world today.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We have to travel way back in time to the heart of the 8th century Abbasid Caliphate, the city of Baghdad, a real center of civilization. And here we meet our main character, Imam Abu Yusuf. Now this guy wasn't just some local magistrate. He was the chief justice, the top legal mind in one of the most powerful empires on earth, serving under the legendary Caliph Harun al-Rashid.
What makes Imam Abu Yusuf so important to our story is that he literally wrote the book on how to run a country's finances fairly. His work, the Kitab al-Kharaj, was a total game changer. Think of it as the world's first ever comprehensive guide on taxation, public money, and how a government should handle its wealth with justice.
But you know, a book full of great ideas is one thing. The real test is what happens when those ideas collide with reality. And that test came in the form of a serious crisis. A local governor, trying to squeeze more money for the state, started imposing these absolutely crushing taxes on the local farmers and peasants. People's lives were being ruined. They were losing their ability to even survive.
And this is where Imam Abu Yusuf stepped in. He made a ruling that has echoed through history. He said, taxation must not destroy livelihoods. The state is custodian, not owner. I mean, just think about that for a second. The difference is huge. A custodian protects and manages something for someone else's benefit. An owner can do whatever they want. It's a profoundly different way of looking at power.
And this wasn't just him saying, hey, that's not fair. He laid out a rock-solid legal argument. He said these taxes were illegal because they violated the fundamental pillars of a functioning society. First, simple justice. Second, the public's well-being. And third, the basic economic dignity that every single person deserves.
So here's the kicker. His ruling had real teeth. He declared the governor's actions haram, which means religiously and crucially legally forbidden. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a binding legal order. The governor was held accountable for his actions, and those unjust taxes had to be rolled back. Justice was actually served.
What an incredible story of justice from the ancient world, right? But I know what you're thinking. Is this just some interesting historical fact? A cool idea that stuck back in 8th century Baghdad? Well, let's hit the fast-forward button by about 1,200 years and jump across the world to find out.
And here's where it gets fascinating. Look at this comparison. On one side, you have Imam Abu Yusuf's principle. The state acts as a custodian for the public good. And on the other, thousands of miles and over 1,000 years away, you have the U.S. Supreme Court talking about the fundamental need for fairness in what the government does. The language is different, the context is different, but the core idea, it's exactly the same. A government's power has limits, and it must be used justly.
What we're really looking at here is a universal concept. You could call it fiscal justice. It's this idea that pops up again and again in all sorts of legal systems throughout history. It's the simple, powerful truth that government finances aren't just about numbers on a page. They are fundamentally about fairness and the state's deep responsibility to its people.
And this isn't just a two-way comparison. This golden thread of justice runs all the way from the courts of ancient Baghdad, weaves its way through the legal thinking of the U.S. Supreme Court, and it's still a central part of legal debates today in countries all over the world, including right in the modern legal system of Pakistan.
So if you take away just one thing from all of this, let it be this. A government's power to tax is never absolute. It is tied to a profound, almost sacred responsibility to its people. It's a trust. A duty to protect the public's well-being and to always uphold their dignity.
And that brings the wisdom of an 8th century judge right to our front door. It leaves us all with a really important question to think about. When you look at the policies around you, is your government acting like a custodian, carefully managing things for the benefit of everyone? Or is it acting like an owner, taking whatever it wants for its own reasons? The answer to that question truly matters.
Extended shout out here. This entire explainer, every fact, Every legal principle was meticulously, and I mean meticulously researched and authored for you by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer. Honestly, his incredible work is the very foundation of everything we're going to discuss today. He's the one who's brought so much clarity to what can be a really complex and, frankly, vital subject. So a massive thank you to him for making this possible.
So let's just put that question right out there, front and center. Because really, this gets to the very heart of the deal between you and the state, right? Is there a limit? Can a government just decide to take more and more and more? Or is there a line in the sand that they absolutely cannot cross? Let's find out.
All right, that question leads us right into our first big idea, understanding the limits on state power. Think of it like this. The power to tax is not a blank check. It's a game with very specific rules.
And at the absolute core of those rules is this beautiful principle called fair taxation. Now, don't let the simple name fool you. Its power is in its simplicity. It basically means you as a citizen have a right to know the rules of the game. The government can't just make things up as they go along. Taxes have to be clear, they have to be predictable, and they can't be arbitrary. No surprises.
And look, this isn't just some vague philosophical idea. Oh no, this principle has real teeth. There are things the state is flat out forbidden to do. For example, they can't just slap you with a tax that's so confusing nobody can figure it out. And get this, they can't change the rules retroactively. They can't come to you and say, hey, you know that thing you did last year? Well, we just decided it's taxable, so you owe us. No way. And they definitely can't punish you for breaking a rule that wasn't clear to begin with. It all comes down to one word, predictability.
Okay, so that's the principle. But how does it work in the real world? Let's take a look at how Pakistan's constitution acts like a shield, putting this very idea into practice.
And within that constitutional framework, you've got the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Think of them as the ultimate referee, or maybe a guardian. Their job is to stand right in the middle, between the government's power to tax and your fundamental rights as a citizen. They are the ones who make sure that line we've been talking about is never, ever crossed.
And that brings us to the main event, a landmark court case that shows this principle in action in the most brilliant way. We're talking about the 1997 ruling, the case of Allahi Cotton Mills. This is the case that really set the standard, a true cornerstone for defining the limits of taxation.
Okay, listen to this. This is the core of the court's ruling, and it is powerful. They said taxation must not become confiscatory. Now, confiscatory, what does that even mean? It's a fancy word for saying a tax can't be so high, so extreme, that it's basically the government just taking your stuff, seizing your property. It's the court drawing a line in the sand and saying, look, the point of taxes is to run the country, not to bankrupt the people who live in it.
But wait, it gets even better. The court didn't just stop there. They went deeper, making a huge statement about what taxation is even for. And here it is. Just let this sink in. The purpose of taxation is justice, not exploitation. Wow. I mean, that one sentence changes everything, doesn't it? That's the core reasoning of the whole case. It takes taxes from being just about money and spreadsheets and turns it into a question of morality, of what's right. It's about building a fair society, not just taking money from people.
So what's the big lesson here? What's the moral of this whole courtroom story? Well, it's about something huge. It's about the very foundation of what makes a country work or not work.
And you can see it laid out right here. It's like two different roads a country can go down. On one side, you have fair taxation. That road leads to justice, to stability, and ultimately to survival. But on the other side, you have unjust taxation. And that road, it leads to exploitation, to instability, and, as history has shown us time and time again, it can lead to total collapse. The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
So that leaves us with one last big question, and this one's for you to think about. We've seen how the courts can act as a guardian, right? But if a country's very survival depends on this idea of fair taxes, what's our role in all this? What is the citizen's job, your job, my job, in making sure that line is